put a ring on his finger, and he put new shoes on his feet. I mean, I would be tempted. Butch, I would be tempted to, when he came back, no, I would be tempted to say, I told you. I'd be tempted to say, I told you this is what was going to happen to you. I told you, you abandoned all of my teaching. I would have been tempted to say that, but Christ in this parable doesn't say that. Christ in this parable says that when the boy came back, Carl, after he had done everything wrong, I mean, if you documented the list of activities that he did, you could check every single one of them off in the wrong way box. And he returns to a father who puts a robe on his back, a ring on his finger, and new shoes on his feet. I might have wanted him to work like a slave. I might have wanted him to re-earn his position in the family. I might have wanted him to say, I'm sorry, Dad, I was wrong. I might have wanted him to say that. Those might have been words that I wanted to hear, but Jesus doesn't say that. He says the boy who was all wrong, messed up, burned up all of the money, when he returned, he put a robe on his back, a ring on his finger, and new shoes on his feet. Well, now you say, well, then why do you keep saying that? Well, if you're a student of the word, you know that robes are symbolic of righteousness. Robes are symbolic of blessing. And you ought to bless somebody sometime. No matter, it's not about what they do. You ought to bless somebody sometime. It's not enough to say, I respect them because they respect me. I bless them because they bless. No, you ought to bless somebody in spite of what they do. I mean, you know, haven't we been judgmental sometimes? Haven't we been judgmental when they have not participated? They haven't rehearsed. And they come the week before the musical. I mean, haven't we wanted to say, no? Haven't we wanted to say, no, you've got to earn. You've got to earn your position. Haven't we wanted to say, where week in and week out, it's the same small core of children who come, but on Easter, it's 50 kids that we haven't seen. Christmas, 75 speeches. Never seen them in our lives. You want to say you need to earn your position back. Right. Word of God does not say that, though. And when we want to discuss how we re-embrace, how we reconnect, how we rejuvenate, how we re-energize those who go a different way, we need to look at what Jesus said. Father, on the son's return, gets a robe on his back that symbolizes blessing. We see in two areas in 1 Samuel 17 and 18. 18 specifically where Jonathan and David make a connection, and one of the ways that Jonathan symbolizes his covenant with David is he puts a robe on his back. That indicates we're connected. I'm blessing you. You are a part of me. We see in Isaiah chapter 61 where even Jesus at his baptism quotes a scripture that discusses his mission and what he is to do, and that he is to preach, and that he is to teach, and that he is to bring the good news. We see later in those verses that Isaiah speaks of a robe as a righteous indicator of salvation. And so we see with the father to his son, the first thing he does is he blesses him. Then says he puts a ring on his finger. Well, what do rings symbolize? During this time and even before this, in many cases, the rings symbolize belonging. Rings identify, in many cases, slaves to their master. In other words, you could look at the ring on one's finger to know to whom he belonged. Also, the ring was the decree that authenticated what someone in power said. And so the ring must be an identifier. First, he blessed him by putting a robe on his back. Then he identified him, separated him from everybody else. Yes, sir. Said, in other words, son, I know you want to come back as a slave, but I'm identifying you as one of my own. Yeah. Put a ring on his finger, authenticated him. We look in the book of Esther where we see King Xerxes putting out a decree to follow through with Esther's request that save the Jews. And what he said was, put my signet ring stamp on the document. Because if a document has my signet on it, it cannot be overridden. In other words, when he identified him as his own, nothing and nobody could change that. First thing he did was put a robe on his back to bless him. Second thing he did is put a ring on his finger to identify him. I'm almost done. And the third thing he did was put some new shoes on his feet. It's very interesting when we consider shoes and their meaning. We know that when you look and you want to go back and deal with Greek and all of that kind of stuff, which is good, but one of the things that you have to always realize is that Jesus was a contemporary of his day. And so you want to go to that language where what they spoke, where he was. And so that's why when we look at the Passion of the Christ, we see it in Aramaic because we know that that was the language of the day. And so sandals, however, throughout the word are indicators of you going somewhere. In a fine Jewish house, you never went in there with your shoes on. You never went in there with your shoes on. And the reality is that if he had been out there living all kind of crazy lifestyle and losing everything, his shoes were an indicator of where he had been. Shoes are also an indicator of the direction that you're going to go. And in other words, he put some new shoes on his feet to give him a new direction. Three things the Father did.
Yes, he did.
Put a robe on his back to bless him.
Ring on his finger.
Put a ring on his finger to identify him. Put new shoes on his feet to redirect him.
Right.
I heard you this morning saying that your son called. Put a robe on him to bless him.
Yeah.
Put a ring on his finger to identify him. Put new shoes on his feet to redirect him. I deal with children every day, all day. I try to keep three things in mind. Doesn't matter how crazy they come in. I've had to put it on some parents. I had to let them cuss for hours at a time. And when they got finished, I blessed them. Identified them. I redirected them. Oh yeah, they're struggling. A lot of them going the wrong way. A lot of them don't know what tomorrow holds. But when you got some experience, you see the Father here may not have always been right himself. Father may have gone through some things not always perfect. But one thing that I have to remember as I live it, not as I preach it, not as I teach it, but as I live it, that my job is not so much to condescend. My job is not to judge. My job is not to try to make you realize how you've done me wrong. My job is not to point out to you where you have shortcomings or where you have sinned, because we realize that all of us have sinned and come short. But my job when you return is that you are blessed by me. I ought to bless somebody sometime. I identify somebody sometime, because it doesn't matter how wrong you are, how wrong I am, I'm still a child of the King. And then I've got to redirect.
There you go.
Okay, I'm almost done. If you need to see it in another way, if you need to see it from the perspective of the cross, let me share this with you. Do you remember, as we come to resurrection time, do you remember how Jesus hung between two thieves? Do you remember that one of them was indignant? One of them felt as though we are all in this same boat together. The fact that you are hanging here too means simply that you are no better, no more powerful than me. But there was one on the other side. One who was looking for a robe. Hanging on a cross looking for a ring. Hanging on a cross struggling to live, looking for redirection. And I see Christ symbolizing the Father who stands afar off looking for his son. His sons were right next to him. Didn't this father have two sons? Doesn't this word talk about the indignant attitude of the older one? But then there was one who was looking for a robe, looking for a comeback. Let me tell you something. It's not too late for you to look for a comeback. It's not over for you. It's not too late for you to renew a realistic prayer life. It's not too late for you to turn from the ways that you've been going. It's not too late to come back around. But that one thief who was hanging there looking for a robe, a ring, and some new shoes said this in essence: if you are who you say you are, if you are who you say you are, that was him coming to himself, Carl. Just like the boy who ran away, we see a thief hanging with his head down, coming to himself and looking to Jesus to say simply, if you are who you say you are, if you are who you say you are, I need a robe. If you can do what you say you can do, I need a ring. If you're really who they say you are, if you really have the power that you have, I need some new shoes. And Jesus says this. First, he looks at him, Carl. When he looks at him, that's the ring. That's the ring, because when I look at you, then I've identified you. When I look at you, that means I know who you are. When I look at you, that means I've connected myself. I've acknowledged your presence. Even in his broken state, Jesus puts a ring on his finger. And then he says this. He says, this day. This day. In other words, he says, there's nothing that you need to do. He says, go get the robe. Go get the robe quick. Right now, he doesn't have to earn it. He doesn't have to grovel. He doesn't have to beg. He doesn't have to plead. I want to bless him right now. I want to bless him right here. I want to bless him in this position. I want to bless him where he is. I want to bless him while he's broke. I want to bless